Yeah, you
So
talked
run
about
that dumb shit again.
You have talked about white belt magic.
I don't know that I've ever said those
on
words.
the podcast. I will go back and dig
White
it up.
belt magic.
White belt magic.
You ever heard me say the words white belt magic? Paul, have you ever heard me say white belt magic? Fran, anybody? Eli. All right, so go ahead with this fucking shit you made up.
I will pull up the fucking episodes. No, you've talked about it in the context of like when higher ranks start doing that more higher rank shit, and then they get a new guy, so they get an expectation of a pattern that guys are going to do, like purple belts respond a certain way. Then you get a brand new guy in off the street who doesn't react how a purple belt does, and it throws that higher rank off. You've called it white belt magic.
Yeah, I don't recall. But, I mean, so the problem is you get accustomed to patterned responses, and that's good to a certain point. It's like your brain makes chunks out of complex tasks, right? So like when you first start learning how to drive and you got to shift gears, your brain goes, okay, I need to shift gears. And then in order to accomplish the task of shifting gears, you have to go like, I'm going to push the clutch and let off the gas and move this thing here and then let off the clutch as I accelerate. Like you have to do 16 fucking things in order to make that happen. But after a while of doing that pattern enough, your body goes, it makes like a folder, right? Like so your brain goes shift gears and your body does 16 things, but you're not conscious of all of the individual steps because you put that into one chunk that's filed under shift gears, right? So the same thing happens when somebody goes to escape side control and everyone that moves their arm in this direction is going to do this thing, and you get accustomed to that. It's like chess, you know, if you make this chess move, a good chess player is going to fucking make this predictable move, right? So you get accustomed to every time somebody in this position shifts their weight that way, it's the beginning of this thing that you then counter with A, B, C, and D. And so you kind of chunk that in your head, which is good because it saves time. And anything that you automate lets you kind of fly at a higher altitude and think about it. Like David Allen, the guy that wrote Getting Things Done, talks about altitudes, which is kind of interesting. He's like, when you're at 10 feet flying an airplane, you're thinking about the 100 yards in front of you. And when you're at 30,000 feet, you're not thinking about 100 yards in front of you. You're thinking about 1,000 miles in front of you, right? Because your altitude is different, your scope of thought is different. So it's kind of like when you automate a bunch of the littler shit, it allows you to sit above the game and think later on, like moves down the road. Like you can start setting a longer chess type game because a lot of the smaller shit is automated, right? But then the problem is you give up control of those automated things. It's why if you rent a car and the gear shift is different or the clutch has a different catching point or whatever, you start driving like shit until you really stop and start thinking about it because you're automated for the feeling of your car and not this other car, right? So it kind of screws you up a little bit. So it's like when you get these automated responses through jiu-jitsu, which is important, but then a white belt comes in or some game that's being weird represented. Some guy comes in, starts throwing some weird shit, and even though technically the shit he's throwing is less good, it's not high percentage and reasonably sound, it will fuck you up and throw you off because when he shifts his weight, you're expecting A, B, or C, and he goes fucking X, Y, Z. It goes totally different. He's shifting this way to do something you literally have never witnessed before, you know? And so you have to be in more control of what aspects are automated and when you allow autopilot to turn on and off. It's like a pilot. A pilot will consciously turn on autopilot and then we'll consciously, oh, bad weather, let's turn that shit off, right? I talk a bunch of shit about pilots, I have fucking no idea, I'm assuming, so I'm making a weird, maybe it's a terrible analogy, I don't know. But that's kind of in my head the way it works. It's the same way. If somebody is moving in predictable fashion, you can tell yourself, I allow autopilot, and let some of those tasks become automated so you can start thinking about a longer strategy. When you're with a white belt or somebody doing fucked up, weird, low percentage shit, you have to take it off autopilot because the autopilot decisions aren't going to make sense, you know? The good news is that people that do weird shit because they're bad, those people are not fighting a very long game themselves. Like, they're doing one move ahead. So you can't reasonably predict this long game based on their process. But it doesn't matter, because if you don't kind of go automated, you can respond well and correctly teach one of those things. Like you can get in a rental car and change the way you drive based on the feeling of the car. So I think the problem is most people either don't understand that concept or don't realize that's a thing. So then when they go with somebody that's terrible, they just keep it on autopilot and things don't mesh like they're supposed to, and then they get really frustrated and they don't do that well. But I think they kind of blow that off, because if you're in jiu-jitsu to win sport, you can almost bet money on the fact that everybody that you're going to go compete against is also going to be doing the typical standard type of shit within a certain amount of deviation. So your automated responses work well. If you're thinking about self-defense, you have got to have the ability to shut autopilot off in rough weather and actually make minor adjustments based on the shit that you're seeing at that moment. Because if you don't, like you'll do worse with white belts, because you're going to be used to these kind of higher level responses that aren't accurate. Man, like you go to do this pass, a fucking idiot will push and try to sit up and push you off. A good guy nowadays might in that same situation try to do fucking reverse Barambola or whatever, you know what I mean? And like if you're going to compete, you have to be accustomed to it because you got to know what you're doing. But if you don't spend a little bit of time rolling with dirt bags, or at least visualizing self-defense or rolling with strikes every once in a while, you'll forget those movements and then you'll get stuck and you have like higher level sports jiu-jitsu and a fucking dishwasher's still going to take your wallet, you know? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, I don't know. So, whatever white belt magic, I don't know.